please sign that. Have you received your results yet? From last year? Yeah. They come out Friday. Thursday, Friday.
Friday.
Yeah.
Friday.
Everybody happy?
Happy.
Right, so I want to talk to you about referencing and the use of legal citations. There's some material I want to talk you through that you may be very familiar with. So if you feel that you are, just ask me to move on. Okay, I don't want to labour a particular point unnecessarily. But hopefully that you will find some content within the hour, the next hour, that you will find useful. And there are some important points I do need to stress in terms of the academic regulations as well. You need to be mindful of. So I want to talk about the use of footnotes and citations. Come in. I think it can be helpful to think of your footnoting, your use of citations, as serving three different objectives or sets of purpose. Firstly, when you draw from somebody else's material, third party's material, come in. Thank you. When you draw from somebody else's material, which of course you will do, because as legal scholars, that is primarily what we do. We analyse what other people have written about the subject. It's very unusual, not impossible, it's very unusual for a legal scholar to be involved in field research, and hopefully your supervisors will have persuaded you to avoid any element of field research for your dissertation. So primarily what we do is analyse what other people have written about a subject and then comment on or present our analysis. So we need to recognise that fact, okay, that we are drawing on somebody else's material. That's important to ensure academic integrity, that we're not presenting somebody else's material as if it was our own. And academic integrity is vital for all legal scholars. You don't want somebody else presenting your material as if it was their own. So when you are drawing from somebody else's material, give credit to that person. You must use your citations as a way of giving credit. Secondly, another way to think of your citations, your footnotes, is a way of taking the reader of your material, if they are interested, to the source. So if they're really interested to look at the material that you've drawn from, give them enough information about the source to take them to it. And then thirdly, and this can be important for a 10,000 word dissertation, any word limited piece of work, there will be material that you will have looked at, you will have come across during your research, where you feel perhaps because of your word limit you cannot present analysis about it. You just don't have enough words available, or you think it sort of might take you off your topic just slightly, but nonetheless it's of interest. You can use your footnotes to demonstrate the breadth of your research. Now, I often come across examiners of LLM dissertations that will look at footnotes as a way of developing a sense of how in-depth the student's research analysis was. So please use your footnotes in that way if it's appropriate. If it's appropriate for you to do so. So how should you present your footnoted material? Well, first and foremost, we want you to use footnotes, not in-text notes. The standard approach for legal writing is to use notes at the end of each page. Footnotes. If you come across social science work, they might use in-text notes to provide their citation as they're writing. We want you to use footnotes. And end-of-page notes, not end notes. I had to write some academic material for publication at the beginning of this year, and the publisher insisted on us all using endnotes. Wow, it was difficult enough to write it. You know, keep reflecting on the citations that I'd used when all of the notes were at the very end of this 15,000 word chapter that I had to write. You know, it was a real problem going backwards and forwards. So it's much easier for you and the reader if you present your citations at the end of the page in which you are writing. So if you use Word or the Apple version, it will do that for you. We also urge you to follow the Oscola style of referencing. So lots of people talk about Harvard referencing style. That really doesn't kind of work for legal writing. Use the Oxford Standards Citation of Legal Authorities format. We presented for you on the VME, I think the Oscola Quick Guide, probably all you need to understand Oscola format. Oscola does publish a full manual, which is like a thesis by itself. So by and large, everything you will need to present in your writing will be covered with the Oscola Quick Guide. Oh yeah, come in. And then I'm sure a number of you will either be trying to follow in a very pedantic way the formatting recommendations that Oscola presents, or will be asking your supervisor about what style to use. My guidance to you is actually it doesn't really matter whether you put case names in italics or article names in italics or upwards case, provided you are consistent throughout your dissertation. And I think it's consistency that is critical, because if you start swapping, interchanging italics with stand-up text, it begins to look messy. So follow what the Oscola guide suggests, but if you have a preference, if you like putting case names in italics, do so, be consistent. The other thing that Oscola suggests in terms of using parenthesis around quoted text is that if it is more than, I think it's 3 lines, it might be 4, 3 or 4 lines, you indent the text and then put it in italics, and you don't put it in inverted commas. And if it's 3 lines or less, then you put it in speech marks. By all means, follow that. I mean, that's what the Oscola standard suggests. My preference is to put everything in speech marks, and then there can be no debate, no discussion about whether you are quoting exactly the same. But once again, be consistent, whichever style you adopt. Just be consistent throughout your 10,000 words. So what I want to do now is just take you through a sequence of examples of citation formatting for different materials. If you are familiar with any of these examples, just urge me to move on quickly, and I'm pretty sure you will be familiar with some. If you're not, don't feel embarrassed to say, can you just spend a little bit more time on this? So, I'll take this as long as I need to, within an hour or what, I can move on further back if you like. Because so much research now relies on material that is published on the web, I always start with some guidance on web-based material. And Oscola deals quite nicely with how you should cite material that you have sourced for your web publication. So in many respects, you need to present web source material in the way you present any material that you are sorting. You need to capture the name of the person that's written the material. With some material, that's not always easy. I'm sure you will have, during your own research, you will have come across some maybe government published material where there isn't the name of an author, but the name of a department, government department. Anyway, try and capture the name of the author, the name of the material itself, so the name that's given to the article or the book or the government paper or whatever it is, its name, the publisher's details, so the name of the publisher or the name of the government department that's published it. Any other material that's relevant, so any other information that's relevant to the material, so it might be the version number, the date, which edition. That's going to be important if you're drawing from the material that's in its second or subsequent edition. And then for web-based material, you need to provide the URL and give the date that you accessed the material. And that's important because from time to time, some material just disappears from online publication. You need to demonstrate that you found it on this particular date and give the URL. Now, you need to be a little discerning with the URL because occasionally, if you just copy and paste from your web browser, you'll find this massive string of sort of stuff that looks like algebra. That will, of course, if you present it all, it will look a bit peculiar because it will run to 10 or 12 lines, and it's going to, of course, eat into your word count as well. So try and work out the shortest version of the URL that you can present. So I've given you an example here of some material that I once found. So you'll see that follows the second bulleted example. It follows what Oscola requires. So the name of the author, so it's the government department, so it's Her Majesty's Home Office that published it. The name of the article, itself, the material. I think Oscola asked that that's been in inverted commas. And then the URL and the access date. Now the golden rule for web-based citing web-based published material is if it's available in paper, on paper I should say, on paper, that's its primary source. So you should cite the paper copy, not the web published copy. Having said that, I don't think any examiner for your dissertation is going to be that particular, provided you have correctly cited it somehow. But if you want to be particular, then it's the paper copy that you should be looking to publish first and foremost. So with web-based material, remember, if other than that URL and the access date, it follows a consistent format for what we will find in all of the conventions relating to citation. Name of the author, name of the material, publisher's details, the date, publication. If you make sure you capture those things, they're not going to be that far from getting things right. Now, if you're going to quote, which I'm sure you will all do throughout your dissertation, quote exactly what somebody else says, then present it as a quotation. Ideally in inverted commas, make it clear that it's a quotation. Really simple. Stuart Bazley said, I must get my citations correct in my dissertation. And then, of course, you're going to take the reader to the source of where I said that. So it was in an article following those naming conventions I just described to present the article. It was in a speech. That is, of course, the easiest way to present what other people have said or written about the area of your research. However, your work will come across, if you're not careful, it will come across as a bit of a jigsaw of other people's quotations if you just present throughout your 10,000 words what other people have said about a subject. So you should attempt to try and paraphrase what other people have said or written. And that is more fitting, I think, for a dissertation or piece of work that is attempting to provide some analysis of other people's work or analysis. Because you can inject within your paraphrasing your analysis as well. But when you do that, please make sure that you correctly give credit for that other person's work, and you also present a citation. So you make it very clear that you are attempting to summarise what I said during this lecture. Okay? Don't fall into the trap of failing to do that because you think you're not quoting exactly what I said, because you're of course then going to present my own views and comments as if they were your own. Okay? Presenting that important academic integrity that I mentioned. So you're going to have to master the skill of paraphrasing. So you don't need to say Stuart Bazley said the following or Stuart Bazley explained, but you might want to indicate in your writing that what you're just about to present as a précis or a piece of paraphrasing is drawn from a class that I know. Or you could just provide a straightforward piece of paraphrasing and then use your citation. Either is fine, but provided you are making it clear that you have drawn some of my work. Okay, so I'll give you a simple example here. Remembering the citation as well. Demonstrate where you draw the material from. But when you are paraphrasing, try and inject your own analysis as well. Stuart Bazley indicated the following. I disagree because I think for whatever reason. Decided cases. You're all analysing law from a common law jurisdiction, I expect. So you will draw and present a lot of research from court cases. Do you feel comfortable with citing decided cases? Fairly straightforward, but I'm happy to. I don't want to labour the point and spend 5 minutes on this if you will feel very comfortable, but if you want me to talk through it or address a couple of points that was troubling you. No? You're all okay? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. What can I say? You can use your citations when you're presenting case names to take the take the reader to the exact location in a decision or a judgment. So use some pinpointing at the very end. So in addition to the volume of the law report that where the decision is presented, you might want to take the reader to an exact location. Some law reports use page numbers, some use paragraph numbers, some use both. So just think very carefully about what piece of numbering you're going to use to take the reader to the exact location. And use, if you're pinpointing, use some square brackets around the number, okay, to distinguish it from the volume number from the law report. Okay. You might find some cases that are on the cusp of the year end, where you'll find two different years. So you have the year of the official law report, and then the year of the journal which is published. Okay, so make sure you're clear on what year you're using. Be clear on why there are two different years. Okay. Legislation you refer to. Fairly straightforward. If you're referring to legislation during your writing, I suppose it is one area that will contradict what I said earlier about not using in-text notes. If you're writing about Section 21 of the Financial Services and Markets Act and financial promotions, and that's what you're writing in your text, you don't need to give a footnote as well, just because it's just going to repeat what you have said in your analysis about that particular piece of law. So don't waste your word count by repeating in your footnote. Make sure if you're referring to a draft of the law before it receives royal assent in this country, you do refer to the bill and not the act. And if you're referring to secondary legislation and statutory instruments, that you provide the instrument reference number. Let's use a combination of the date. I can use this clever pointer thing, and the instrument reference number, which is at the end. So that you'll find that in the title of the statutory instrument. But you can either choose to give the full name in the main body of your writing if you want to, or if you want to try and shorten what you're writing, then you use a footnote to give the full name of the statutory instrument. And then European legislation. It's no more tricky, but it's just a bit more wordy. So you're giving the name of the directive or the regulation, and the official journal reference. Do make it clear whether you are referring to the regulation, the regulation, or combined regulation and directive at the time, whether it's a directive or regulation. So the last time I looked at OSCOLA, it didn't deal particularly well with administrative agency publications. So rule books, other administrative agencies, soft law, maybe guidance, policy statements of consultation. I think you can just deal with it following those sort of title and naming conventions that I set out at the beginning. So make sure you present the author's name, which may be the agency itself, the name of the material, the publisher's details, which again may be the agency itself, and the date, importantly the date. With administrative agency material, some agencies' law regulation is extremely fluid, changing with some regularity. So make sure you, in your footnote, you present the date for the version, or the applicable law date, so there will be no confusion about which version you were referring to. And you may need to be a little bit creative about the name that you give to the material itself. So some agencies use acronyms for their rules rather than a full name. So you might want to create a full name. Just remember those are the golden name, author's name, publication, publisher's name. And again, if it's only available online, then present it as web source material, the URL, and the access date. Government papers and reports. So hopefully by now you're getting a sense of the main conventions that have to be followed. So with some government reports, there will be a named author. So if there's an inquiry, perhaps senior judge may be appointed to conduct or lead the inquiry, and that judge's name will appear on the publication. For other government material, there isn't a named author. It's the author is the government department. So I've given you a couple of examples drawn from Oscola. One where one of an inquiry where there was a senior judge, so that's the legate report into the tribunal system in the United Kingdom, and then secondly a paper on the use of tribunals again, but published by the then Department of Constitutional Affairs. So if you look at those two, although one has a person's name and the other doesn't, they follow the same convention. You've got name of the material, publisher, date. All okay? For me to move on. Books and articles. So those same conventions. Just remembering, however, if there some materials written by 3 or more authors, you only present the first author's name. If you're following the Oscola guide, which might be an indication why when there's a multi-author book, there's a mad scramble for who gets their name first in the list. So you're looking to capture the author's name, the name of the book, the edition, importantly, who the publisher is, the date, and any page pinpointing reference that you want to use. Okay, so use paragraphs if that's helpful, or use page numbers. Paragraph. And then multiple authors. First author, and then the words "and others," followed by the name of the book, edition number, publisher's detail, date, pinpointing reference. And some books are published by multiple authors where there's a general editor that perhaps doesn't write any of the key content other than a preface or an introduction. But if they have acted as editor of the book, use the editor's name followed by the word editor or the abbreviation. So with Professor Ryder's book on the international research handbook for financial crimes, which I think has about 30 authors. You don't need to give the names of all 30.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
What if the book is clearly divided between authors, and you want to quote one of them? Do you still have to?
So some books have the name of the chapter author, don't they?
Yeah.
So aside from the title and the name on the title, the front cover, I mean, you get names of the chapter authors. So you could recognise that. You could put. I think it eats into your word count a little bit, but you could. I think you need to give the name of the general editor. So you could put Rider B, and so we're going to pretend that book was written by 30 different people, each with their name and following the chapter name. So B. Rider and others, Insider Dealing, Market Abuse. I'd probably put it at the end, before the pinpointing. Chapter 2, Stuart Baisley, compliance, and then pinpointing reference. I mean, if you do want to present within your footnotes, within your citations, material that Oscola doesn't quite deal with, or if you have a particular preference for how you recognise somehow the material that you're drawing from, don't be scared about doing that. Don't be nervous about it, but provided you're consistent throughout your dissertation, because that's a lack of consistency can start to make your dissertation look a bit messy. Okay. Be consistent. Newspapers, speeches. I mean, in some respects, just regard your citation of that material as if it was a journal article. Really, recognising that some newspaper material, if it's taken from an editorial section, may not have the name of the author, so you just need to insert the words editorial. Some newspaper articles, you might find the journalist's name is in tiny font somewhere at the end, so you need to look for it, find it. It may not be bottom of the page. Some of it's published only online, so just have regard for all of the standard formalities that I've described. Also, I think it's important to say, aside from the citations, be a little discerning about what newspapers you draw material from. Make sure the newspaper is befitting the academic scholarship that you want to present. And that may be a recognition that not all newspaper material is of itself analytical. It can just do no more than present a narrative on some gossip. So think about whether it really adds any value to what you're writing. I'm not suggesting that you don't draw material from the Sun newspaper or the Daily Mail, but if there's an article in one of those newspapers about something that isn't presented anywhere else, and you are confident that it is accurate, and it's better than just a piece of gossip about Love Island or whatever it's writing about, then of course use it. But just think carefully. Think carefully. And then generally think very carefully about anything that you draw from web-based publications that's not from like a conventional source, because it may not be accurate. It may not be totally accurate, and that includes Wikipedia. So some Wikipedia articles that are still under construction, so to speak, may not be that accurate. So you can also use your footnotes as a way of cross-referencing and saving on your word count. So if you find that you are regularly referring to material from a single publication which is absolutely fine. You don't need to give the full citation for that publication each and every time that you reference it. You can save word count by cross-referencing a few words back to, if you like, your main citation. So if you very simply here, I'll give you an example of just two footnotes where I've referred to some material in footnote number 1, and then in footnote number 2 I want to refer back to that material, refer to that material again, but maybe to a different section or a different chapter. I'm going to save myself about 10 words by just indicating to the reader that they need to look at note number 1. Just put an N for note, or an FN for footnote, if you like. N1, and I've added the word, the name Ryder, okay, just so people know that I'm referring to a book on published by Professor Ryder.
If you want to refer to a different page, to a different page.
Within
Yes.
this publication, then in square brackets just put the fresh page. The particular pinpoint. That's fine. The reason I suggest, I think Oscola suggests, that you give an indication of the material is that you may find within a single footnote you have more than one citation, which you'll divide with either a full stop or a semicolon. So if I am cross-referencing, I need to make it clear to whoever is reading my dissertation that I'm referring them to a particular book within multiple citations, particular sections within multiple citations. Okay, Oscola does say that you should cross-reference between chapters. I think that's fine for a 10,000 word dissertation, however, if you do. What Oscola really is dealing with is the practical challenge that you might have as a reader if you say you're reading someone's 100,000 word PhD thesis or a large textbook, and you're on the final page, and then you find the reader is cross-referencing you back to page 3 somewhere. It's got a lot of pages to get back to. So it's designed to assist the practice characters. But provided not consistent with your dissertation, because of the word limit, I don't think it's that much of a problem. You can cross-reference those. You can use plain English in your cross-referencing, which is what I think Oscola urges you to do, just to use the abbreviation N for note. Okay, if you find Latin a bit funky and you like to use it, then you can use a bit of Latin for your cross-referencing, so infra for below, supra for above, IBID, previous footnote. I've embraced plain English. Just use an N or an FN footnote. Now do remember that you need to include within your dissertation a bibliography. Thankfully, it's not part of the word count. But you do need a bibliography. Don't work on the assumption that because you have correctly cited material, correctly used your footnotes, you can absent yourself from a bibliography. You cannot. If you've worked hard and completed your footnotes as you've recently been constructing your bibliography is relatively straightforward copying and pasting exercise. Remembering, however, that in your bibliography you need to organise your material under material types, present it in alphabetical order, and you only need to refer to something once, and you don't need the pinpointing information. So structure it around material types, running in alphabetical order, I suggest. So articles, books, cases, legislation. And then under each of those headings or whatever other headings you choose to use, put the material, the items themselves in alphabetical order. Using the alpha ordering created by the author's name. And if you think back to some of the examples, use the author's family name first, not their given name. So Blazy S rather than Stuart B. So when you're alpha ordering in your bibliography, basis. So don't forget your bibliography and make sure it is nicely structured and presented as it should be. Don't make the mistake of presenting material all at once and present it in order within material types. So if you get your the use of citation right, how you present, how you draw from other people's material, then recognising the need to cite other people's material and not run into difficulty. Academic integrity is an imperative, is important for all universities. All scholarly work, whether it's conducted within a university or outside of the university, it ensures that the person that's responsible for creating the idea or the analysis is given credit, allows thinking to be developed around individuals' own work, and it ensures that you are being marked or judged or evaluated based on your work and somebody else's. So don't fall into the trap of making the mistake of presenting somebody else's work based on your own. Similarly, don't fall into the trap of collaborating with other people. So that means don't buy somebody else's dissertation, don't buy somebody else's work. There are services available that will do that work for people at a fee. Don't. And of course, if you do work as part of a group, a study group, which we encourage, of course, we all learn from one another. I mean, that's part of the background of all universities. We learn from one another. But make sure that you don't all present the same piece of work. Okay? You don't take your colleagues' work and present it as your own. It's damaging to integrity. And it is so easy to pick up and identify that I think a lot of students overlook the fact that when somebody is marking work, it's really easy to pick up, identify when somebody is presenting something that isn't their own. Because we all know you, we all know our students, and we know how our students write and speak. Sometimes the material is presented that's not in keeping with that student's style. So I'm confident you will all get it right. So just think carefully there. Don't fall into the trap of not citing material correctly. because it ultimately will damage your marks. Okay, does anybody have any questions for me? So some I think there's probably one student a term that will be, it's not the same student. Every term there's one student that is researching from some material not written in English, where there isn't an official English translation, and they will ask how they should cite that material, and secondly, what arrangements they need to make for translation. So if you're in that situation, we will urge you firstly to speak to your supervisor and agree something with your supervisor. Now, by and large, if you can keep your supervisor happy, you're 75% of the way home. Okay. So if you are drawing from some sort of non-English material where there isn't an official translation, we're not going to expect you to go to the expense of securing a formal translation service. We will probably rely on your translation. Okay? if the material is written in your home language, we'll rely on that. But just check with your supervisor, can you, that they're comfortable with that, and check with supervisor how you will cite that material, because you may want to use your footnote to indicate that you personally have translated the material from its written language to English. But check with your supervisor. Any other questions?
So please, sir, I will have to submit like 2 bound copies. So at PPP, do you use like turn-it-in machine software to screening plagiarism?
So not everything, I'll share this with you, not everything goes through plagiarism checking software, but some material is checked. Okay. Randomly checked. Yeah, just cross-reference back. Yeah. So make sure you capture somewhere in the first footnote the full citation, and then cross-refer back. Just put the example I've given here. Very simple piece of cross-reference between 2 footnotes. So in the second footnote, pretend the second footnote is footnote 30. Okay. Then I'm giving Professor Ryder's abbreviated name, red pointer, and then cross-referencing back using the N1, which is signifying note number 1. Taking read back to
because I'm used sometimes iPads.
It's fine. Yeah, if you would like to do that, it's absolutely fine. It shouldn't make any difference to your word count, should it? N1 is a word, as is iPad. Yeah, so you can do cross-reference, because it will save you a lot of words.
Can I include in bibliography words that haven't like reference in the book, but I just use for my education?
Well, if there's anything that is in a footnote, so thinking back to one of the things I said in the introduction, that you can use your footnotes as a way of demonstrating your depth of research, even if you find that you're not presenting any analysis from that particular report. By virtue of the fact that it's in a footnote, it's in your dissertation, so you should include it. No? Your footnotes are part of your dissertation. So if you've got if you have some material that you refer to in a footnote, although you haven't analysed that material in your dissertation, you're including it to indicate to the examiner. So there's other stuff that's really interesting that I've come across. But because it's in a footnote, it's in your dissertation, so you should include it in your big file.
What if it's not like, it wasn't science based?
But you have,
No, like I haven't used any
Yeah.
material, but I use it for
but
mine.
it's in your footnote.
It's not even important.
Well, if you haven't included it in your footnote, then so you're not using your bibliography as footnote substitute.
Yeah.
Your bibliography is another way of presenting in alphabetical order all of the material that you've used in your research. But if you've come across material that you haven't cited or haven't referred to in the footnote as other material, then it doesn't need to go into a different. Is everybody clear on submission arrangements? Getting off topic slightly now. Two bound copies.
Yes. Should have copies.
Honestly, you do not need to go to the expense of getting it formally bound. Slightly more than a staple in the corner. I mean, the reason we ask for it to be bound is so that in between the person that you hand it into and when it arrives on Judy's desk, it doesn't come apart.
Okay.
Right? So just a plastic spine from Ryman's or somewhere is absolutely fine. Okay? Well, occasionally I do get a student that will take their 10,000 word dissertation to the book binders around the corner and it's kind of presented to us in this sort of lovely leather cover and with gold emblem, title and name on the front. You don't need to spend £100. You can spend $2.99 on a little perspex cover from Ryman's. It's fine. Just think about is it tough enough to make sure the pages don't become separated. So two of those, because your dissertation is marked by two people. And then there's a cover sheet, a submission page that you need to sign, which is your confirmation that this is your own work.
That's separate, right? You have to sign it.
You have to sign a separate piece of paper and then just put it on the top of the two bound copies. You don't need to have it bound as part of the dissertation. And if for some reason you forget or that goes missing, we'll just ask you to sign it. And then just get it in on time. Okay.
Yeah, please, can I ask you something? In your perspective, could you please advise how to get high mark for a dissertation? In your perspective, in your ideal, perfect dissertation.
Right. Keep your supervisor happy.
Okay.
Okay. Which of course does mean you'll have to submit some work to your supervisor for review and comment. Allow for the fact that you need to give your supervisor time. So most supervisors have got at least 10 people to supervise. I've got a full-time job, so I can't turn things around overnight. Allow for the fact that if your supervisor gives you some feedback, you're going to have to deal with the feedback. So that what that does say is don't send your final copy to your supervisor the night before it's due to be submitted, because best will in the world, the supervisor's not going to be able to read it, and even if they can, you're not going to be able to deal with any feedback in time. That's unlikely. Another two things to recognise. One is a law dissertation. The difficulty that a number of us have, I'm not singling out students, but a number of people working as postgraduate legal scholars, is that the subjects don't tend to be typical law subjects always, but we still need to remember that what we are presenting is analysis of law. So you've got to find your law to analyse. So if you're writing on a commercial topic, don't submit a piece of commercial journalism, okay? Because that's not going to get you marks for a postgraduate law programme. So write about the law and present analysis of the law. So if you find, I mean, what I would urge you all to do when you get to a point in the term where you think, well, it's close to having completed my dissertation, put it down for a couple of days and then read it through again. Reflect on what you've written and ask yourself, am I presenting analysis or am I just presenting a narrative? If your dissertation is just presenting what the law is, then that may be enough to get you across the pass mark threshold, but it's unlikely to be enough to get you into those higher degree classes of marks. What gets you into merit and gets you into distinction is the depth of your research, the depth of your legal analysis, and kind of to get you into distinction is the real strength of what you've written. So things like structure are going to really help, and the hypothesis, so the issues that you've identified. But for merit and distinction, always there's got to be strength of analysis. So when you're looking for how to structure analysis, what we're really saying is identify issues that the law has, weaknesses, ambiguity, inconsistency. Just search for those things and present your analysis about ambiguity, weakness, inconsistency, so on and so forth. Also think about structure, whether your dissertation tells a story. Okay, does it follow a logical sequence or a logical pattern? Don't just present a dump of information, which might be interesting, but it kind of, for the examiner, it then becomes difficult to identify what it is you are trying to say. I mean, I say to all of my students, so I don't want to upset anything your supervisors have already told you, but I always say to my students, think in terms of having around about 5 chapters. Is that what everyone's been told? Yeah? No? Your supervisor said 2 to 3 chapters. It doesn't matter. I mean, but I always say about 5 chapters, because that lends itself quite nicely to 2,000 words. 2,000 words a chapter. So the balance looks about right. It doesn't really matter. But an element of what you're writing. So in my model, the first chapter, but even with an element of what you are writing is introductory. It doesn't matter what you call that section or chapter, but because it's coming first, it's introductory. So you're going to use that introductory section, those introductory paragraphs or the introductory chapter, as a way of telling the examiner why the subject is interesting, why you've thought it is interesting. That could be because the law is ambiguous, or it's developing, or it's new, or it's old and is out of date. You know, why you've thought it is interesting. And then within your introductory section, you want to give a paragraph or 2 explaining what you've looked at and as daft as this may sound, what position you've arrived at. So you're not leaving the examiner to have to read through all 10,000 words to the bitter end to find out what you've concluded. You're not presenting a cliffhanger piece of work. So you think of any good government publication, within their introductory section, there will be an executive summary of what this piece of work is about, what position it's reached. So in using academic scholarly talk, that executive summary is your hypothesis. They are the issues that you've identified and the position you've reached. Now you're then going to go on to use the substance, the more substantive elements of your dissertation to explain to the reader how you've arrived at the position you've arrived at. So, chapter 2 or section 2 or paragraphs, whatever, you're dealing with these substantive issues and presenting your analysis about those issues. And then I always say to my students, don't use your last chapter or section or whatever you want to call yours to present brand new analysis. Use that last section to do what you're going to call it, reaching a conclusion, which could be about you drawing together a variety of loose ends that you have from largely independent chapters, or sort of putting a different slant to some of those things that you've identified during those chapters, or maybe presenting, I've seen some students do this really well, presenting some recommendations for reform, but don't fall into the trap of presenting for the very, very first time a brand new piece of your analysis in that last paragraph, or that last couple of paragraphs. It just looks a bit odd, because you are kind of falling into the trap. You're running the risk of leaving your dissertation without a conclusion. So that all says, think about structure. Make sure that there is, like all good stories, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So
is it better to give a recommendation at the final chapter?
Kind of tends to be better, but I don't rule anything out, frankly. I mean, we recognise that we're all postgraduate. You're all postgraduate students. You're all studying law at an advanced level. So there isn't a standard answer. There isn't a standard template for a dissertation. I think that as a reader of many dissertations, I think, however, if you present your recommendations midway through your 10,000 words, there's the possibility they'll get lost and forgotten about. Just get lost in that sort of body of work. So it's probably better to present them towards the end.
Sorry, so is it necessary to have a literature review chapter in the dissertation? Is it necessary to have a literature review chapter separately?
So agree that with your supervisor. I always say, given that you are you're writing with a 10,000 word limit, and that you are legal scholars, so of course everything we present is about analysis of written material. You do not need a separate chapter devoted to literature review. Every chapter of yours will be a literature review. Yeah. Nor do you need a chapter on your research methodology. Just use your opening section or chapter to explain the method. But your method is going to be really simple. You've looked at some textbooks and some journal articles. It's different if you're engaged in field research. Then you need a very strong chapter or a few chapters devoted to how you've arrived at your methodology, how it sounds, but you're not. Okay? It's 12:05. Well done, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yes, so I owe some feedback for a number of students. And you haven't sent me anything so far. You can say, okay, just send it over. Yeah. It might take me a few days, a week to get back to you, but just send it over.
Thank you. Because you told me you're very busy.
Yeah.
So,
But it doesn't mean to say you shouldn't send it.
Chapter 6.
I actually thought I have some.
Sir, yes,
Sometimes students
They change one part,
go on.
so it's not, it used to be on Monday, then they changed it, they moved it to Wednesday.
It's not written.
So that's what
heading. This shows
Well,
that
send me what you've done, and then I'll give you some feedback. And if I think the way you've set things out can be improved, I'll say so. Yeah.
Thank you,
Just
sir.
send me what you've done.
Hi, Stuart. How are you?
Good.